Hello and welcome. If you're just tuning in right now, I'd like to know something simple but genuine. Where are you watching this from, and what time is it there? Whether you're settled in bed in Tokyo, sitting on a couch in Sao Paulo, or anywhere else on this spinning planet we share, take a moment and leave that in the comments. There's something oddly connecting about knowing where everyone's watching from when we're all doing this together, even if we're nowhere near each other. But here's the thing about today's journey. We're going to spend the next bit of time exploring the origins of phrases you've probably used hundreds of times without ever wondering why. Words and expressions that have become so woven into the fabric of how we speak, how we think, and how we move through our days that they've become nearly invisible. And often, the stories behind them are far stranger than we could possibly imagine. This is the kind of content designed for a particular kind of listening, the kind where you forget about the time, where your phone stops mattering quite so much, where you can let your mind wander through strange histories, peculiar customs, and the ways human beings have always found meaning in language. So as we move forward, I want you to get comfortable, adjust your pillow, let your shoulders drop. There's nowhere you need to be but here, and nothing you need to do but listen. The phrases we use every day carry within them the weight of centuries. Sometimes they carry stories of violence and necessity, sometimes stories of innocence and accident, and sometimes stories so odd that you'll wonder how humanity ever agreed to keep saying them. Today we're going to uncover 50 of those stories, and we're not going to rush. We're going to linger on the ones that demand lingering. We're going to sit with the mysteries that still exist, even after we think we've found the answers. We're going to remember that language is never just language. It's always history, always culture, always human beings trying to make sense of their world and pass that sense along to the people who come after them. So settle in, because once you know these origins, you'll never say these phrases quite the same way again. The first phrase we're going to explore is one that touches something primal and human. When we talk about someone who faces difficult circumstances without complaint, who endures pain or hardship with a kind of quiet dignity, we often say they're able to bite the bullet. Now, the image that comes to mind is fairly straightforward. A soldier on the battlefield, no access to anesthesia, an injury that needs immediate attention, and the bullet, the small piece of metal, becomes something to bite down on, something to anchor yourself to while the pain floods through your body. The historical accuracy of this is more complicated than we might think. There are accounts from the American Civil War, from frontier surgeries, from countless battlefields and field hospitals, where soldiers were indeed given objects to bite on during procedures. Bullets were available, yes, but so were leather strips, sticks, and cloth. The specific detail of the bullet might be more romantic than factually precise. What matters is the core truth. The practice was real enough that the phrase stuck. It became a way of talking about endurance, about facing the unbearable without faltering. Think about the Civil War surgeon, moving between tents, between wounded soldiers, working frantically with tools that would horrify modern medical professionals. The anesthesia was limited, unreliable, sometimes not available at all. So when a soldier came in with a shattered limb that needed amputation, the surgeon would tell them to bite something, anything. The psychological effect was real. Having something to focus on, something tangible to bite down on, seemed to help people get through the worst moments. The bullet became legendary, partly because it was the most portable, most available object, but also because the image was so powerful. It suggested this contrast between the violence that created the need for surgery and the violence of the surgery itself. You were bitten by violence in the form of a bullet, and now you were biting a bullet to survive the aftermath. The phrase carries forward into modern usage, not just as a way to describe endurance during physical pain, but as a way to describe endurance in general. Someone biting the bullet in a difficult meeting, biting the bullet when facing a difficult decision. The phrase has moved beyond the literal physical context into the realm of metaphorical difficulty. We're all biting bullets now in our own ways, facing situations that require us to grit our teeth and push through. In a similar vein, when we say someone is breaking the ice, we're invoking an image of a frozen body of water and the first person brave enough to step onto it. The ice is solid, or seems to be, but it's also dangerous. You don't know how thick it is. You don't know if it will hold. So when you break it, you're doing something that requires courage, and you're making it possible for others to follow. In Victorian England and before, this was often used in social contexts. At formal gatherings, someone had to be the first to step across a social boundary, to acknowledge a stranger, to begin a conversation. That person was breaking the ice, making it safe for genuine human connection to happen. But there's another interpretation, one that some historians point to. In centuries past, ice that formed on rivers and lakes could trap valuable shipments. Trade depended on water routes being passable, so when workers would go out with chisels and axes and deliberately break the ice to clear the path, they were quite literally breaking the ice so commerce could continue. These weren't aristocrats at balls making polite conversation. These were working people, doing dangerous work in freezing conditions. The ice was thick enough to support weight, but that same thickness trapped ships in place. Breaking the ice meant hitting it with specialized tools, working in teams, creating channels where ships could pass. The effort required was real and physical. Both interpretations carry the same essential truth. Someone had to be willing to go first, to take the risk, to make it safe for others. Whether you were a socialite making conversation with a stranger or a working person with an axe breaking ice on a frozen river, you were doing something brave and enabling others to follow. Now we move to something with slightly more sinister undertones. When someone has been caught red-handed, what we mean is that they've been caught in the act. There's no denying it. There's no excuse you can manufacture because the evidence is immediate and irrefutable. The redness in question is literally the pigment from whatever crime or wrongdoing has just been committed. It could be blood, genuinely. It could be the red of a hand still holding a stolen item, still wet with evidence of theft or harm. It could be the red of a hunting kill, a poached animal, blood still fresh on the hands of someone who's just been discovered breaking the law in medieval Scotland and England, where this phrase apparently originated. The connection to hunting is significant. Poaching was a serious crime, especially poaching on royal or nobleman's land. The penalty was severe enough that it was worth developing language for the specific moment of discovery. Caught red-handed wasn't just metaphorical, it was forensic. It was the evidence itself. A nobleman discovering a poacher on his land could look at the evidence immediately. The blood on a person's hands, the blood on their weapons, the freshness of the kill all combined to create a picture of guilt that no argument could overcome. You couldn't claim you were in the wrong place at the wrong time when you had blood all over your hands and a fresh carcass in front of you. The phrase captures that moment of irrefutable evidence, that moment when all explanations fail because the physical reality contradicts them so completely. There's a different flavor entirely to the phrase hit pay dirt. Someone hits pay dirt when they strike it rich, when they suddenly stumble upon something valuable and unexpected. The origin here is straightforward enough to make you wonder why it isn't better known. During gold rushes, particularly the California gold rush of the 1840s and beyond, prospectors and miners would be digging through what seemed like worthless earth. Day after day, sift through the dirt, find nothing but more dirt, and then hit pay dirt. The earth beneath them suddenly held what they were looking for: gold, wealth, the moment that made all the previous searching worthwhile. The phrase didn't emerge from nowhere. It came from the mouth of people who actually lived this experience, who actually felt the shock of striking valuable dirt after months of striking nothing but ordinary dirt. Imagine months of this work, your back aching, your hands blistered and calloused, your hope starting to fade, the money you invested in equipment running out, the people who believed in you starting to lose faith, and then the pan you're swirling shows color. The dirt you're digging yields something that glints in the sunlight. That moment was so overwhelming, so significant, that the phrase stuck around. Hit pay dirt. You've found what you were looking for. You've justified all the work that came before. This is the moment that makes sense of everything else. The phrase carries within it the entire emotional arc of prospecting: hope, disappointment, perseverance, and finally, unexpected reward. It's harder to pinpoint with exact precision when we talk about knock on wood. Different cultures, different continents, different religions seem to have versions of this. Some point to ancient tree worship, to the idea that wood came from trees, and trees were sacred things filled with protective spirits. Touch the tree, make the tree acknowledge you, ask for the tree's protection. In Christian traditions, some connect it to knocking on the wood of the cross itself, that most central piece of Christian symbolism. Others point to old folk practices around warding off bad luck, where the physical act of knocking was meant to alert spirits or demons to stop what they were doing. There's no single definitive answer here, which makes it interesting. The phrase has accumulated meaning from multiple sources, multiple cultures, multiple layers of human belief and superstition. What's remarkable about knock on wood is that it persists even now, even among people who don't believe in spirits or demons or protective magic. We knock on wood out of habit, out of comfort, out of something that feels like it should work, even if we know intellectually that it doesn't. This is the power of language and ritual. They persist not because we believe in them, but because we need to believe in them, because the act itself provides comfort and hope. The idea of being as mad as a hatter is slightly more grounded in medical and industrial reality, though the link is still contested. In the 18th and 19th centuries, hat makers, hatters, used mercury in the felting process. Mercury is a neurotoxin. Chronic exposure to mercury vapors causes tremors, mood changes, irritability, and behavioral shifts that might well have appeared to observers as madness. Hatters were therefore genuinely experiencing neurological effects from their work. The symptoms were real. The neurological damage was happening in real time as they worked. The confusion came from not understanding why this was happening. People didn't know about mercury poisoning. They didn't understand the cause and effect relationship between the mercury vapor and the behavioral changes they were witnessing. So hatters became known for their strange behavior. They'd have mood swings that seemed unprovoked. They'd make irrational decisions. They'd shake and tremor without apparent reason. To observers, they appeared mad, genuinely mentally unbalanced. But what was actually happening was neurological damage accumulating over years of exposure to mercury vapor. Whether this connection was widely understood or just happened to coincidentally create a phrase that fit a genuine phenomenon is debatable. But the phrase itself does seem to have emerged during a time when hatters were indeed suffering from mercury exposure, which gives it a strange historical resonance. The phrase captured something real, even if the people using it didn't fully understand what they were describing. When it rains cats and dogs, we mean it's raining very heavily. The phrase conjures an image so specific and so surreal that you have to wonder where it came from. And the truth is, nobody really knows for certain. There are theories. Some suggest it comes from Greek phrases and got translated oddly into English. Some suggest it emerged from Old Norse mythology, from stories about cats and dogs. Some suggest it came from the Dutch, or from Old English folk sayings, but none of these trace back with complete certainty. This is a phrase that has genuinely resisted historical explanation. It just started being used, and we don't know precisely why, which in itself is interesting. Language sometimes moves in ways that are fundamentally mysterious. There's something almost beautiful about phrases that refuse categorization, that resist explanation. They exist because they work, because they communicate something that people found useful. Rain was heavy, and someone needed to describe it emphatically. Cats and dogs came to mind, whether by accident or design. And now, centuries later, people across the world use this phrase without knowing why they're invoking animals in their description of precipitation. The phrase sits at the intersection of accuracy and mystery. It describes something accurately, and we have no idea why. Some people have theorized that the phrase might have emerged from the fact that thatched roofs would collect animals seeking shelter, and when the rain was heavy enough, these animals would slide down the roof, giving the appearance that it was literally raining cats and dogs. But this is speculation. The truth remains elusive. The whole 9 yards is another phrase that has spawned incredible speculation. People have theorized that it comes from the lengths of ammunition belts on fighter planes during World War II, that it has to do with fabric widths in tailoring, that it refers to concrete mixer capacities, or even that it comes from sailing terminology. The problem is that none of these theories have been definitively proven. There's no airtight historical evidence. The phrase seems to simply enter common usage, and we're left guessing at its origins, which has led some scholars to suggest that sometimes we invent origins for phrases after the fact, that we feel uncomfortable with genuine mystery, so we construct explanations. The human mind does this. When we encounter something we don't understand, we create explanations for it. These explanations can become more real to us than the mystery itself. We repeat them so often that they become fact, become truth, become embedded in our understanding of how language works. And maybe the phrase doesn't have a single definitive origin. Maybe it simply emerged from the American vernacular because something about 9 yards sounded appropriately emphatic. Maybe someone said it once by accident and it stuck. And now we're all trying to figure out what the accident was, creating increasingly complex origin stories to explain something that was probably quite simple and quite random. This is a fascinating aspect of how language evolves. We don't just inherit phrases, we actively create mythology around them. Dressed to kill sounds relatively modern, evoking images of someone dressing with such intention and style that they're practically dangerous. And yet the phrase goes back to at least the 1600s, when it appeared in writings about fashion and appearance. What's interesting is that the meaning has shifted slightly over time. Originally, it was more likely to describe someone dressing in a way that was impressive or striking, that turned heads, that commanded attention. There's a hint of the dangerous in that, yes, but the danger was social. The outfit was powerful enough to wound the pride of others, to establish dominance in a room. It's a phrase that sits at the intersection of violence and vanity, and it's managed to persist for centuries without fundamentally changing its meaning. Think about the social dynamics of dressing to kill. You're not actually killing anyone, but your clothing is so impressive, so striking, so commanding that it has an almost violent effect on those around you. People notice you, they react to you. You've established dominance through appearance. This is a kind of social power, and the metaphor of violence, of killing, captures something real about that power dynamic. When you're dressed to kill, you're weaponizing your appearance. You're using the tools of fashion to make an impression that's hard to ignore. When someone brings home the bacon, they're providing the income, the sustenance for their family. The phrase carries a weight of responsibility and accomplishment, and the origin is one of those phrases where the most obvious interpretation seems to be true. In agrarian and early industrial societies, bacon, pork, was a valued protein. Families that could afford bacon were families doing reasonably well. Bringing it home was bringing evidence of success, of earning power. The imagery is concrete and familiar. It doesn't require ancient mythology or complex translation. A person provides food, which is the most basic form of security and survival, and so they bring home the bacon. But there's also a theory that it connects to the annual Dunmow flitch of bacon, a centuries-old English tradition where a couple that had been married a year and a day and never regretted it would be awarded a side of bacon, a symbol of marital happiness and contentment. So bringing home the bacon could refer to this kind of success, this kind of domestic achievement. Whichever origin you lean toward, the phrase carries this sense of achievement through ordinary domestic labor. There's no glamour in bringing home the bacon. There's just responsibility and work and the steady effort required to feed your family. The phrase is a celebration of that steady work, that mundane heroism of providing. The cold shoulder is something you give someone when you want to make it clear they're not welcome, when you want to signal rejection or dismissal. And surprisingly, the origin theory here involves medieval feasting. When someone was considered a welcome guest, they'd be served a warm meal, perhaps something like a hot roast. But when they'd overstayed their welcome or weren't particularly wanted, the host would serve them a cold shoulder of meat instead. It was a signal. The temperature of your food communicated the temperature of your social standing in that room. You were being fed, technically, but you were being fed in a way that made clear you weren't valued. It's a beautifully pointed origin, if it's accurate, using something as basic as the temperature of your dinner to communicate social hierarchy. Think about the passive aggression embedded in this practice. You're not turning the person away entirely. You're not refusing them food. You're providing food, but you're doing it in a way that sends a message. The cold shoulder literally tells the person they're not welcome, and the person receiving it understands the message immediately. When you're served cold food while everyone else has hot food, you know what's happening. You know how you're being evaluated. The metaphor has become so powerful that we now use it not just for food, but for any form of social rejection or coldness. Cutting corners is something we do when we want to complete something more efficiently, even if it means sacrificing some quality or safety. The phrase seems to emerge from actual practices, either in construction or in geometric problem solving. If you're building something and you cut the corners short, you'll complete the project faster, but the final product might not be as sturdy or as complete. In navigation, cutting corners meant taking a shorter route even if it was riskier. The phrase therefore carries within it this tension between efficiency and quality, between speed and safety. And that tension remains embedded in the phrase even now, when most of us aren't cutting literal corners anymore. The phrase captures something essential about human nature, the constant temptation to cut corners, to find shortcuts, to prioritize efficiency over quality. We're still doing this now. We're cutting corners in our work, in our relationships, in our moral choices. The phrase suggests that this is not a modern problem. This is something humans have always done, and the consequences of cutting corners have always been real. Something might not work as well. Something might not last as long. Something might actually fail when tested. So the phrase carries within it a kind of warning, a historical reminder that shortcuts often have costs. Dead as a doornail is something we say about something that is completely, undeniably not functioning anymore. The phrase is wonderfully specific, which makes you want to know why. Why a doornail specifically? There are a few theories. One suggests that doornails were repeatedly struck, hammered over and over as doors opened and closed, were bent back and struck repeatedly, and therefore were particularly damaged, particularly dead. Another suggests that doornails, once they were bent, could never be straightened, never be used again, and therefore represented permanent, irreversible death. There's also a literary connection to Marley's ghost in Dickens' A Christmas Carol, where Dickens himself asserts that Marley was as dead as a doornail. But the phrase predates Dickens. It was already in common usage. Dickens was invoking something that was already established, adding his literary weight to it. What makes a doornail so fitting as a symbol of death is precisely the permanence. A doornail is struck over and over again. With each strike, it becomes more damaged, more bent out of shape, less capable of being restored to its original form. The nail accumulates damage until it's completely unusable. Applied to someone or something being dead, the phrase suggests not just absence, but permanent, irreversible absence. You're not just not functioning. You're not functioning in a way that can never be reversed. The specificity of the doornail makes the phrase more powerful than if you just said dead. Dead as a doornail has weight. It has history. It has the accumulated damage of centuries of door openings. Hanging by a thread is a phrase we use when something is in a precarious state, when failure seems imminent, when survival seems unlikely. The image is vivid and clear, something held up by only the thinnest, most fragile thing, liable to fall at any moment. Some trace this back to the sword of Damocles, the famous fable about a courtier in ancient Syracuse who was granted his wish to sit on the throne of his king. But above the throne, held by a single horsehair, hung a sword. The sword hung over his head the entire time he sat there, a constant reminder that power and position are fragile, that disaster waits above even those who think themselves secure. This is one of the most psychologically pointed of all ancient parables. The courtier got what he wanted. He's sitting on the throne. He has all the trappings of power, but he can't enjoy any of it because of the sword above his head. His entire experience of power is poisoned by the knowledge that it's temporary, that disaster waits. Damocles is the perfect representation of anyone who achieves something they think they want, only to discover that the achievement comes with hidden cost or hidden danger. The horsehair is absurdly fragile. You can cut hair. It's not strong. That's the point. That's what makes the story so powerful. The sword is held by something that's barely adequate to the task. At any moment, that horsehair could snap. The danger is not remote. It's immediate, and it's directly above your head. The phrase carries the weight of this story, even if most of us don't consciously think about Damocles when we use it. When we talk about something being the devil to pay, we mean there's going to be a significant price to suffer. And here the origin is murky, though there are fascinating theories. Some connect it to the practice of caulking ships, where paying the devil or paying the devil's due referred to a particularly difficult seam in the hull. Caulking the devil was harder work than caulking other seams, so the phrase became shorthand for any difficult price that had to be paid. There's also a theory that it connects to old bargains made with the devil, the idea that at some point the price would come due and would be terrible. The phrase carries this sense of inevitable reckoning, of consequences catching up with you. Whether the origin is nautical or demonological, the phrase communicates the same idea. There's a cost, and it's going to be substantial. Dyed in the wool represents someone who is fundamentally committed to something, who embodies a quality so thoroughly that it's been worked into their very fiber. The phrase refers to the practice of dyeing wool before it's woven into cloth. The color penetrates the fibers during this early stage, and therefore the color is permanent. You can't wash it out. You can't change it later. It's committed at a molecular level. Applied to a person, the phrase suggests this same kind of permanence. Someone who's dyed in the wool is committed in a way that can't be undone, that's worked into their very nature. It's a beautiful metaphor that still holds its meaning today. Think about the textile workers of centuries past, working with sheep's wool, understanding the science of dyes, even if they didn't have modern chemistry to explain it. They knew that if you dyed the fiber first, before weaving, the color was permanent. If you dyed the cloth after it was woven, the color was less permanent, could fade or wash out. So the finest, most permanent colors came from dyed fibers. A person dyed in the wool has been colored, so to speak, at their very core. The coloring has penetrated all the way through. You can't change it without destroying the person, without fundamentally altering them. Breaking the bank is what you do when you spend so much money that you deplete your resources entirely, when you've exceeded what you can reasonably afford. The phrase seems to come directly from gambling contexts, from the idea that the bank is the house's reserves, the money set aside to pay out winners. If you're a successful enough gambler, you can break the bank, can deplete those reserves. The phrase entered common usage from gambling halls and card games, carried forward by people who understood the thrill and the danger of trying to beat the house, of trying to take so much from the institution that it can no longer absorb the loss. At your wit's end is what you say when you've exhausted all options, when you can't think of what to do next. The phrase seems to come from the idea that wit, intelligence, resourcefulness has a limit. You can use it, you can apply it to problem after problem, and then there's no more of it left. You've arrived at the end of your wit. There's nothing more you can think of. The phrase carries a sense of exhaustion and defeat, but also a kind of honest assessment. It's not pretending you still have answers. It's acknowledging that the well has run dry. There's something vulnerable in admitting you're at your wit's end, something humbling about reaching the limit of your intelligence or resourcefulness. Let the cat out of the bag emerged from marketplace practices in medieval times. Merchants would sell piglets in bags, but unscrupulous merchants would sometimes put a cat in the bag instead, hoping the buyer wouldn't notice until they got home. So the phrase, letting the cat out of the bag, became synonymous with revealing a hidden deception, with accidentally or deliberately exposing a secret. It's a phrase born from fraud and the desperate hope that nobody would notice, but they usually did, eventually. When a customer would come home and open the bag expecting a piglet, they'd find a cat instead. The deception would be revealed immediately, and the phrase stuck around as a way to talk about any deception being exposed, any secret spilling out into the open. Under the weather is what we say when we're sick or feeling below par. The phrase seems to originate from naval practice. When sailors felt ill, they would be sent below the deck, specifically below the weather deck, which was the deck exposed to the elements. Below the weather deck was calmer, more sheltered, a better place to recover. So sailors who were feeling the effects of seasickness or illness would be sent to these lower decks to rest. Over time, the phrase became shorthand for simply feeling unwell. You're under the weather. You've been sent below deck. You're not functioning at full capacity. There's something interesting about how naval terminology has become embedded in common speech. Sailors developed their own language, their own ways of describing their experiences, and many of those phrases have persisted even though fewer and fewer people actually work on ships. But the language survives, passed down through generations, becoming part of how we all talk. Under the weather is one of these naval metaphors that has completely lost its nautical context for most of us. We don't think about sailing ships anymore. We just know that being under the weather means we're not feeling well. Spill the beans comes from ancient Greece, where people would vote by putting beans in jars. White beans for yes, black beans for no. If you reached into the jar before the official count and spilled the beans, you'd reveal the results prematurely. You'd let everyone know how the voting was going before it was officially finished. The phrase stuck, and now when someone spills the beans, they're revealing information that was supposed to stay secret. It's a phrase that captures the moment of premature revelation, the moment when secrecy is shattered. Enough to piss off the Pope is a phrase that carries religious irreverence. It means something is irritating or frustrating enough to bother even someone dedicated to peace and spirituality. The literal origins are unclear, though it seems to emerge from a kind of irreverent folk tradition of pushing boundaries in language. You're going so far as to suggest that the most patient, most devoted person would lose their composure. It's hyperbole designed to communicate maximum frustration. The Pope becomes a symbol of ultimate patience, ultimate peace. If something is irritating enough to anger even the Pope, then it's really, truly irritating. Fall through the cracks is something that happens when something is overlooked, when it slips out of notice because it's between defined spaces, between responsibilities. The image is of something small enough to fit through the space between wooden floorboards or between the cracks in stone. The thing hasn't been destroyed, it's still there, but it's fallen into a space where nobody can see it or access it easily. Applied metaphorically to responsibilities or procedures, the phrase suggests that gaps exist in how we organize and manage things, and sometimes important stuff falls through those gaps. The phrase also suggests something about human systems. They're never perfect. There are always cracks. There are always things that slip through. Dressed to the nines or dressed to the nines is what we say when someone is dressed impeccably, when they're pulling out all the stops with their appearance. The origin of this phrase is genuinely mysterious. Why nines specifically? Some suggest it relates to the number of planets visible in the old astronomy. Some connect it to tailoring and suggest it means you're using 9 yards of fabric. Some suggest it's related to Old English or Old Norse, to the mythology of the 9 worlds. But none of these have definitive proof. The phrase seems to emerge from folk etymology, from people using it without knowing its origins, which means the origins have been lost to time. Flying by the seat of your pants means making it up as you go along, improvising, not having a plan, but hoping for the best. The phrase seems to come from aviation, from early pilots who didn't have the sophisticated instruments we have now. These pilots flew by feel, by instinct, by the feedback they could sense in the aircraft through their body. They were flying, quite literally, through the sensations felt in the seat of their pants. Modern aviators might call it stick and rudder flying or flying by the seat of your pants, referring to the tactile feedback you get when you're piloting an aircraft with minimal instruments. The phrase carries this sense of being attuned to subtle feedback, of trusting your body's awareness of what's happening. Think about those early aviators. They didn't have the radar we have now, the sophisticated navigation systems. They were flying by instinct, by the feel of the aircraft in their hands and their body. They could sense subtle changes in how the aircraft was moving, subtle shifts in the wind, the way the aircraft responded to their control inputs. They were quite literally flying by feeling the aircraft through the seat of their pants. The phrase persists, even though modern flying is mostly done with instruments and computers. But the phrase captures something real about that era of aviation, and something real about improvisation in general. Sometimes the best guidance is what you feel in your gut. Forlorn hope refers to a last, desperate attempt to achieve something, a final effort made with very little expectation of success. But the phrase originally referred to something more specific. A forlorn hope was a small group of soldiers sent on a mission that was expected to fail, that was designed to soften up an enemy position or gather intelligence before the main assault. These soldiers were essentially expendable. They were sent forward knowing the odds were heavily against them. The phrase was borrowed from the Dutch term verloren hoop, which literally means lost troop. It carried this sense of sacrifice and desperation. Now, when we use it, we're talking about any desperate final attempt, but that original military context is embedded in the phrase. Give the devil his due is something we say when we acknowledge that even someone or something bad has positive qualities. It means being fair in your judgment, not letting bias completely cloud your assessment. The phrase seems to come from the idea that even the devil, in medieval theology and folklore, deserves to be treated fairly, deserves to have his positive attributes acknowledged. To do otherwise would be to underestimate him, would be to lose the ability to see him clearly. Applied generally, the phrase suggests that fairness requires acknowledging good even when dealing with entities or people we consider fundamentally bad. There's something philosophically interesting about this phrase. It suggests that truth and fairness require us to be honest even about things we dislike or fear. We can't just dismiss our enemies or our adversaries entirely. We have to be honest about their strengths, their accomplishments, even if we oppose them. This is more difficult than simply dismissing them entirely, but it's more honest. It's more just. Ears to the ground means you're staying informed, you're listening carefully to information as it comes, you're aware of what's happening in your community or profession. The phrase seems straightforward enough. If you put your ear to the ground, you can hear vibrations, sounds that travel through the earth before they reach you through the air. Native Americans, some historical accounts suggest, use this technique to hear approaching horses or travelers from a distance. You get down low, you put your ear to the earth, and you listen. The phrase carries this sense of direct perception, of getting information firsthand rather than through second or third-hand sources. There's something tactile and immediate about the phrase. You're not hearing information through the telephone or through reading or through hearing it from someone else. You're putting your ear directly to the ground. You're making direct contact with the source. The phrase suggests vigilance and awareness, the sense of being tuned in to what's happening around you. Get the lead out is shorthand for hurrying, for moving faster, for not wasting time. The origin here seems to relate to bullets. Specifically, lead is what bullets are made of. If you get the lead out, you remove the bullets from your chambers. You're no longer weighted down by ammunition. You're faster without the weight. Or, in another interpretation, if you've got lead in your body from wounds, getting the lead out means removing the bullets and therefore becoming mobile again. The phrase carries this sense of shedding weight, of moving faster because you've removed something that was slowing you down. It's a phrase that suggests that we're often carrying unnecessary weight, and if we shed it, we can move faster. Go the extra mile refers to doing more than what's required, going beyond the minimum, making an extra effort. The phrase has deep historical roots in multiple traditions. In Christian theology, it comes from the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus tells his followers to go the extra mile when asked to carry something a mile, to voluntarily carry it a second mile. It's about choosing to do more than obligation requires. But before that, in Roman times, soldiers could compel any subject in their territories to carry their gear for a Roman mile. The phrase might also refer to going beyond that compulsion, to making an extra effort. Whichever historical route is most accurate, the phrase carries this sense of voluntary additional effort, of exceeding minimum expectations. The idea of going the extra mile has become almost a cliché in modern business speak, but the underlying concept is still powerful. It's about choosing to do more than you're required to do, about going beyond the minimum because you believe in the work or the person you're helping. It's a phrase about generosity, about not stopping at the point where you could legitimately stop. Hold your own means to maintain your position, to stand firm, to not be pushed back or defeated. The phrase seems relatively straightforward in origin, from the idea of holding your own ground in battle or in competition. You maintain the territory that belongs to you. You don't advance, but you don't retreat either. You hold your own. It's a phrase that suggests resilience, the ability to resist pressure while maybe not being able to advance. There's something admirable about just holding your own. It suggests you're doing well enough to maintain your position against opposition. Hot under the collar is what you say when someone is angry, agitated, or bothered. The phrase refers to the physiological response of anger. When you're angry, blood flow increases, your body temperature rises, you flush, your neck and collar area, in particular, become warm. So someone who is hot under the collar is physically displaying the signs of anger. The phrase makes physical reality into metaphorical shorthand, allowing us to talk about emotional states by referencing bodily ones. There's something scientifically accurate about this phrase, which is nice. The phrase emerges not from metaphor, but from observable fact. People do get hot when they're angry. They do flush. Their body temperature does rise. So describing someone as hot under the collar is describing something real about their physical state that corresponds to their emotional state. In a jam refers to being in a difficult situation, being in trouble, being stuck. The phrase seems to come from the image of something stuck in jam, something that's gotten itself into a thick, sticky substance and can't easily extract itself. It's a precarious position. You can try to pull yourself out, but the more you struggle, the more stuck you might become. The phrase carries this sense of being stuck and not being able to quickly reverse your situation. Jam is the perfect metaphor because jam is slippery and sticky at the same time. You can't get a solid grip on anything to pull yourself out. Have an axe to grind means you have a personal grudge, that you have something you want to accomplish that serves your own interests rather than a higher goal. The origin of this phrase is specific and wonderful. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, but repeated in folk etymology, about a man who asked a boy to turn the grinding wheel while he ground an axe. The boy assumed this was work the man was paying for. The man assumed it was a social exchange, that the boy would do it out of general goodwill. At the end, the man offered only thanks, no payment. The boy complained that he'd been tricked, that the man had an axe to grind all along and had used the boy's labor for his own purposes. The phrase emerged to describe that kind of hidden agenda, that kind of self-interested motivation. Whether this story is literally true doesn't matter. What matters is that it captures something real. Sometimes people ask us to do things, and it turns out they had their own agenda all along. They were using us. They had an axe to grind. The phrase has become a way of calling out that kind of manipulation, that kind of hidden motivation. Head honcho refers to someone in charge, the boss, the person leading the group. The phrase seems to come from Japanese, where honcho was a term for a group leader or squad leader. American servicemen in Japan after World War II picked up the term and brought it back to the United States. It entered American English as a way of referring to someone in charge, and it stuck around. It's one of those phrases that traces back to cultural contact and language exchange, where different languages bump up against each other and leave permanent marks. Hit the hay is what you say when you go to bed, when you're going to sleep. The origin seems to come from older times when people actually slept on hay, straw, or straw mattresses. Your bed was literally hay. To hit the hay was to go lie down on your hay bed. So the phrase is quite literal in origin, referring to the actual material that made up your mattress. The phrase persists even though most of us don't sleep on hay anymore, which is why it feels slightly archaic, but also charmingly old-fashioned. There's something poetic about the phrase, hit the hay, go to sleep, find rest. The phrasing makes sleep sound like something you're actively pursuing, something you're approaching with intention. And in a way, you are. You're going toward rest, toward sleep, toward the hay that will become your bed for the night. In the bag refers to something that's assured, that's certain to happen, that's been secured. The phrase seems to come from hunting or game. If you've shot game and put it in your bag, it's yours. It's secure. It won't get away. Applied to other contexts, the phrase means you've secured something, you've made sure it's going to happen. It's in the bag. It's not going anywhere. There's nothing more that can happen to prevent it. Victory is in the bag. The deal is in the bag. The implication is that you can stop worrying now. The outcome is determined. In the final analysis, or rather, let's talk about hit the nail on the head. This phrase means exactly what you'd think it means. You've identified the core of a problem. You've done something perfectly correct. The origin is obviously related to the physical act of hammering a nail. When you strike the nail correctly, you drive it straight and true. When you miss, the nail bends or doesn't go in properly. So hitting the nail on the head becomes a metaphor for perfect execution, for understanding exactly what needs to be done and doing it. It's a simple phrase with a simple origin, and that's refreshing. Not every phrase needs an obscure historical origin. Sometimes the most straightforward explanation is the right one. Hair of the dog refers to having a small amount of alcohol when you're hungover, the idea being that what got you drunk in the first place might help you recover from being drunk. The phrase comes from an old folk remedy idea, the concept of fighting poison with poison. If a dog bit you and was rabid, The theory went, you could take hair from the dog that bit you and use it to protect yourself. It's superstition, obviously, but the phrase carried forward into other contexts, applied to hangovers and alcohol. Now we know it doesn't really work, that a Bloody Mary the morning after doesn't actually cure a hangover, but the phrase survives, perhaps because the logic is intuitive even if it's not medically sound. The phrase suggests that maybe the cure is similar to the cause, that maybe you need a small amount of what caused the problem to fix it. Hand to mouth refers to living paycheck to paycheck, having just enough to get by but nothing more, with no safety net. The phrase seems to come from the image of someone who can only feed themselves by bringing food directly from hand to mouth. There's nothing stored up, nothing saved for later. Every moment is about the immediate need. The phrase carries this sense of precariousness, of living without cushion or security. It's a phrase that suggests vulnerability and instability, the constant threat that if something goes wrong, there's no buffer to absorb the impact. Hang fire is what you say when something is delayed, when action is suspended, when you're waiting to see what happens before you commit. The phrase comes from firearm terminology. When a gun fails to fire immediately after the trigger is pulled, it hangs fire. The firing mechanism didn't work properly. There's a delay. You might not know if it will eventually fire. You have to wait. Applied to other situations, the phrase suggests a kind of suspended action, a holding pattern. A decision hangs fire. A project hangs fire. It's not canceled, but it's not moving forward either. Hard as a rock seems self-explanatory until you realize it's one of those phrases that's been around so long that its origins are lost. It's a simile, comparing something to a rock in terms of hardness. But when did it start being used? Was it originally rock-specific, or did it evolve from harder materials? These questions don't have clear answers. Some phrases are so foundational to language that their origins predate written records, predate any documentation we have. We can't track them back because they disappeared into the ancient past, used so frequently and for so long that they became invisible, became just the way people talk. Hard as a rock is one of these phrases. We know it's ancient. We don't know why rocks in particular were chosen as the standard of hardness. Head over heels refers to being deeply in love, or being in a state of confused turmoil, being turned upside down by emotion. Interestingly, the original phrase was heels over head, which makes more physical sense. If you're flipped upside down, your heels would be over your head. At some point, the phrase got reversed to head over heels, which doesn't make physical sense, but has become the standard usage. The error or reversal happened so long ago and was repeated so often that the incorrect version became the correct one. Language is flexible like that. What matters is consistency, not logical accuracy. We've all agreed that head over heels is the correct way to say it, and so it is. He who hesitates is lost is a phrase that suggests you should act decisively, that delay might result in missing opportunity. The phrase seems to come from battle context or hunting context, the idea that hesitation gives your opponent time to act, gives prey time to flee. It's a phrase that contains within it a worldview, that action is generally better than inaction, that missing the moment might mean missing the opportunity forever. It's less certain now than it might have been historically. We've learned that sometimes hesitation is wisdom, sometimes delaying action gives you information you need. But the phrase persists, encoded with that older worldview. Holy moly is an exclamation of surprise or wonder, a sudden expression of shock or amazement. The origin is genuinely unclear. Some trace it to Holy Moses, altered to sound more emphatic. Some suggest it comes from Holy Mary, corrupted into moly. Some trace it to moly, a mythical herb from Homer's Odyssey, something with magical properties. But none of these derivations have definitive proof. The phrase just seems to have emerged from American vernacular, and now we use it when we're shocked or amazed, without necessarily knowing where it came from. It's a phrase that feels old-fashioned now, something people said decades ago, but it still pops up occasionally, a remnant of older ways of speaking. Home stretch refers to the final phase of something, the last part of a journey or task. The phrase comes from horse racing. In a race course, the stretch or straightaway is the final part of the track, the home stretch leading back to the finish line. So when you're in the home stretch, you're in the final phase, heading toward completion. It's a phrase that carries the sense of being almost done, of being able to see the finish line. The emotional tenor changes when you realize you're in the home stretch. Suddenly, the work feels manageable. You can see the end. You know you can make it. I am butter seems like an odd phrase, but it's a variation of amends, and the origin is unclear. What's more interesting are phrases like hung out to dry. This one refers to being abandoned, left to face consequences alone. The phrase seems to come from literal practices of hanging laundry to dry on lines, of putting wet cloth out to be dried by air and sun. If you hang something out to dry and then forget about it, it just stays there, exposed to the elements. Applied to a person, the phrase suggests you've been left exposed, abandoned, without help or protection. Someone hung you out to dry, they left you vulnerable. The image is cruel and precise. You're hanging there, exposed, unable to defend yourself or escape. In the black means making profit, being financially healthy, not running a loss. The phrase comes from accounting practices where red ink was traditionally used to mark losses and black ink was used to mark profits. So if your ledger was in black, you were profitable. If it was in red, you were losing money. The phrase persists even though most accounting isn't done with actual ink anymore, but the association remains. In the black equals good financial health. The color coding became so embedded in how we think about finance that we still use it in our language. In the red is the opposite, of course. You're losing money, you're running at a deficit, your expenses exceed your income. The phrase carries the same accounting origin as in the black, but the meaning is reversed. Both phrases are so embedded in financial terminology that they've moved from accounting jargon to common speech. We all understand instantly what it means to be in the red or in the black. The color symbolism has worked so well that it persists even though the actual practice of using red and black ink has largely disappeared. In the blink of an eye refers to something happening very quickly, almost too fast to perceive. The phrase references the fact that a blink, the closing and opening of an eye, happens almost instantaneously. So something that happens in the blink of an eye has occurred faster than the time it takes to perform that simple, reflexive action. It's a phrase that speaks to the speed of human perception and how much can change within the smallest unit of action we can consciously perform. It's raining pitchforks is a variation on raining cats and dogs, another way of describing heavy rain. The substitution of pitchforks for cats and dogs is interesting. Why pitchforks? Agricultural tools seem like an odd choice, but falling pitchforks would be dangerous, so there's a kind of logic to the metaphor. Heavy rain feels like an assault, dangerous like falling pitchforks. It's a phrase that never quite reached the adoption level of raining cats and dogs, but it emerged from the same impulse to create strange, specific imagery for the experience of very heavy rainfall. The phrase never caught on, which is interesting in itself. Why did raining cats and dogs survive while raining pitchforks faded away? Sometimes the arbitrary choices we make early on determine which phrases persist and which disappear. Joystick is a phrase that shows how language evolves and how modern technology gets woven into human communication. Originally, joystick referred to the control stick in an aircraft. Pilots used the joystick to control the plane. The term was playful, the joy in joystick referring to the fact that flying was inherently joyful, or perhaps the term was ironic, given that flying a military aircraft was not actually joyful. But the term stuck, and when video game controllers were developed, they adopted the same term. Now, joystick is most commonly associated with gaming rather than aviation, which shows how language adapts and changes as technology changes. The phrase has migrated, taking on new meanings as new contexts emerged. Keep calm and carry on became famous during World War II in Britain, a phrase that was used on government posters to encourage public morale during bombing raids. But the phrase has roots in earlier motivational language, in the general idea of maintaining composure during difficult circumstances. After the war, the phrase was largely forgotten, except it was rediscovered in recent years and has become a kind of universal motivational mantra. It's been printed on t-shirts, mugs, posters, becoming ironic in its ubiquity. But the original phrase emerged from genuine need, from a government trying to keep its people functional during an existential threat. The phrase captured something real about how to survive difficult times. Stay calm, don't lose your composure, and keep moving forward. Kill two birds with one stone is a phrase that means accomplishing two goals with a single action. The origin is obvious enough, and while the phrase is relatable, it's also a bit grim if you think about it literally. You're destroying two creatures with one act. But the effectiveness of the metaphor is undeniable, and the phrase stuck because it communicates efficiency and dual accomplishment so effectively. The image is clear enough that it works across languages and cultures. Despite the grimness of the image, the phrase has persisted and become ubiquitous. This says something about human priorities. We're willing to invoke violence if the metaphor is effective enough. Kick the bucket refers to death, to dying, to the end of life. The origin of this particular phrase is the most genuinely mysterious of all the phrases we're discussing. Some suggest it comes from the wooden bucket that held the hind legs of pigs during slaughter. Some suggest it relates to the bucket people kicked away when hanging, the thing they stood on before they died. Some suggest it comes from a folk custom or misheard word. But none of these theories have definitive historical backing. The phrase is old enough that its true origin might genuinely be lost. We use it regularly without knowing where it came from, and that's oddly fitting for a phrase about the most universal human experience that remains fundamentally mysterious. Kick up your heels means to behave in a carefree, joyful manner, to engage in celebratory behavior. The phrase comes from the image of someone dancing with abandon, lifting their heels in energetic, uncontrolled movement. When you're kicking up your heels, you're expressing joy through physical movement. It's a phrase that makes joy physical, that turns an emotional state into an active behavior. The phrase suggests that joy is something that demands physical expression, that can't be contained entirely in the mind. You have to move. You have to dance. Knock someone's socks off means to impress someone greatly, to surprise them in a positive way, to wow them. The phrase seems to come from the image of impact so strong that it physically knocks socks off someone's feet. It's hyperbolic, obviously, but the imagery is clear and immediate. When you knock someone's socks off, you've made an impression that's hard to ignore. The phrase suggests that you're so impressive that you've literally knocked them out of their shoes. Know him from Adam refers to not knowing someone at all, having no previous connection with them. In biblical reference, Adam is the first human, the beginning point. If you don't know someone from Adam, you don't have the most basic connection with them, you're starting from absolute zero. The phrase carries this sense of complete unfamiliarity, of being strangers who've never met before. It's a phrase that invokes the Bible, that makes biblical reference into everyday speech. Knock on wood is something we return to now, having mentioned it earlier. But it's worth another look because the phrase is so universal that it cuts across cultural boundaries in interesting ways. Different cultures, different religious traditions seem to have variations on this. What unites them is the idea that touching something real and solid, something anchoring and permanent, can provide protection or prevent bad luck from happening. There's something in human nature that wants to make physical contact with the world around us when we're uncertain, that wants to ground our hopes in concrete reality rather than leaving them floating in abstract possibility. The practice persists even in our modern, secular age. We still knock on wood when we want to express hope or fear about what might happen next. Lend a hand means to help, to offer your assistance, to contribute your effort to something. The phrase is straightforward in origin and meaning. A hand, metaphorically, is your ability to work, your capacity to do things. When you lend a hand, you're offering your capacity to help solve a problem or accomplish a goal. The phrase suggests generosity and connection, the idea that we're all capable of helping each other, that our labor is something we can offer to one another. Let sleeping dogs lie is a phrase that means you should leave something alone, not poke at it, not stir up trouble unnecessarily. The phrase comes from the obvious image of a sleeping dog. If you leave it alone, it will remain sleeping, peaceful, non-threatening. But if you poke it or wake it, you've activated its aggression, you've created a problem that didn't exist before. Applied to situations, the phrase suggests that sometimes the best action is inaction, that not disturbing something that's currently stable is the wise choice. The phrase carries the wisdom of recognizing that not every problem needs to be solved immediately, that sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing. Let the cat out of the bag, which we've discussed earlier in different contexts, returns here as a reminder of how the phrase carries within it the memory of medieval fraud and marketplace deception. The phrase persists across centuries because the practice of fraud persists, and the image of being deceived is so vivid that it works across time and culture. You never know when someone's going to let the cat out of the bag on their own deception. Like taking candy from a baby refers to something being very easy to do, almost embarrassingly easy. The phrase is unkind if you think about it literally. You're comparing your task to taking candy from a baby, which would indeed be easy, but also unethical. The phrase perhaps emerges from the actual experience of adult superiority, of the fact that adults can easily do things babies cannot. It's a phrase built on physical fact and an assumption of power difference. The phrase suggests that some tasks are so easy that they're almost beneath notice, that they require no real skill or effort. Long and the short of it refers to the essential point, the core meaning after you've separated it from the details. The phrase suggests you're taking something long and complex and reducing it to its short, essential form. It's a phrase about distillation, about finding the core truth underneath the elaborate details. When someone asks you for the long and the short of it, they want you to cut through the complexity and get to the point. They want efficiency and clarity. Look at you now refers to a moment of realization or recognition, seeing someone or something differently than you did before. The phrase isn't ancient, and it seems to emerge from common speech, from the moment when you stop and really see someone or something and recognize that change has occurred or that you've been misunderstanding them. It's a phrase of revelation, even if it's not always a happy one. The phrase suggests surprise and recognition combined, the sense that time has passed and things have changed. Make your blood boil means to make you angry, to infuriate you, to provoke an intense emotional reaction. The phrase refers to the physiological response of anger, where blood flow increases and your body temperature rises. Your blood is literally heating up in response to anger. It's a phrase that makes an abstract emotion concrete by grounding it in bodily sensation. When you're angry enough that your blood is boiling, you're at a high level of emotional intensity. The image is dramatic and visceral. Make no bones about it is a phrase meaning you should be direct and clear, you shouldn't hedge or soften your words. The phrase seems to come from the act of eating meat with bones. If you make no bones about something, you're not picking around the bones, not being careful and delicate. You're being direct and straightforward. It's a phrase that comes from the practical experience of eating and extends into the realm of communication. When you make no bones about it, you're not being precious or careful about your words. You're just saying what needs to be said. Meaner than a junkyard dog is a phrase that captures intensity and aggression. A junkyard dog is trained to be aggressive, to protect property, to be threatening. So someone meaner than a junkyard dog is more aggressive and mean than something specifically trained to be threatening. It's a comparison that emphasizes intensity. The phrase suggests that the person in question has transcended normal meanness and entered into a realm of exceptional nastiness. They're so mean that they make a junkyard dog look friendly. Meet your Waterloo refers to the moment of your defeat or downfall. Waterloo was a specific battle, the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, where Napoleon was defeated and his military dominance ended. So when you meet your Waterloo, you encounter the event or person or situation that defeats you, that brings you down. The phrase has moved from historical reference to metaphor, but it carries the weight of that specific moment of decisive defeat. Napoleon is the ultimate historical example of someone meeting their Waterloo. He was powerful, seemingly invincible, and then Waterloo. His dominance ended. The phrase invokes that sense of dramatic reversal. Monday morning quarterback is someone who criticizes decisions made by others after the fact, with the benefit of hindsight. The phrase comes from football terminology. After the game is finished, any observer can see what the quarterback should have done. They can analyze the plays that didn't work, can suggest better alternatives, but they're analyzing with complete information and without the pressure of the moment. A Monday morning quarterback is someone doing exactly this kind of hindsight criticism. The phrase carries judgment about the quality of such criticism. It suggests that criticizing something after the fact when you have all the information is less impressive than making good decisions in real time with incomplete information. 1 in a million refers to someone or something extraordinarily rare, uniquely special. The phrase is straightforward in meaning and origin. If you have one thing out of a million, you have something exceptionally rare. It's a phrase that emphasizes scarcity and value. The idea that this particular person or thing stands out from all others. The phrase carries the sense that something 1 in a million is so rare that finding another one like it is almost impossible. Organized chaos refers to a situation that appears chaotic but actually functions, that seems disordered but has some internal logic to it. The phrase acknowledges that perfect order isn't always necessary for things to work. Sometimes the chaos is necessary, sometimes the disorder allows for flexibility and responsiveness that pure organization wouldn't permit. It's a phrase that suggests a kind of acceptance of messiness, an understanding that the best systems aren't always the most organized ones. Out of the frying pan and into the fire means you've escaped one bad situation, only to end up in a worse one. You've moved from one problem to an even bigger problem. The phrase uses the image of cooking, of heat and danger. When you jump out of the frying pan to escape the heat, you're jumping into the fire, which is worse. It's a phrase about bad timing, about escaping danger only to find worse danger, about the possibility that your actions might make things worse instead of better. The phrase suggests that sometimes, in trying to escape a difficult situation, we make things worse. Out on a limb refers to going out on a limb and taking a risk. The phrase comes from the image of climbing out onto a tree limb, where the farther you go, the more fragile things become, the more likely the limb is to break under your weight. Someone who goes out on a limb is taking a risk, is putting themselves in a position where they could be hurt if things go wrong. It's a phrase that emphasizes risk and vulnerability. When you go out on a limb for someone or something, you're putting yourself at risk for them. Paddle your own canoe means to be independent, to chart your own course, to not rely on others. The phrase comes from the image of paddling a canoe by yourself, providing your own power and direction. If you're paddling your own canoe, you're in control. You're not depending on anyone else to move you. It's a phrase about independence and self-determination. When you're paddling your own canoe, you're responsible for where you go. You're not relying on someone else to steer. Pain and suffering is a phrase that connects two concepts, two things that typically go together. The phrase shows up in legal terminology, in discussions of damages and compensation. It's also used more casually to refer to difficult experiences. The phrase suggests that pain and suffering are natural companions, that they occur together and should be thought of together. The pairing of these two words has become so standard that we almost don't notice we're using two words for what could be one concept. Panic button is a phrase that refers to an emergency response, to overreacting to a minor problem. The phrase seems to come from the literal panic buttons that are installed in some buildings and vehicles, buttons you press in case of emergency. If you press the panic button over something minor, you're overreacting. You're treating a small problem as if it were an emergency. The phrase suggests inappropriate escalation of response. Pressing the panic button is a dramatic action that should be reserved for genuine emergencies. Part and parcel refers to an integral component, something that's so connected to something else that you can't separate them. The phrase seems to come from legal terminology, where parcel refers to a piece of property or a package. Something that's part and parcel of something else is bound up with it, is inseparable from it. The phrase suggests that you can't have one without the other, that they're fundamentally connected. Part and parcel together have come to mean an essential and inseparable component. Party pooper is someone who ruins other people's fun, who prevents a party from being enjoyable. The phrase is playful and unkind at the same time. It suggests someone is actively preventing enjoyment, is actively ruining something that was supposed to be fun. The phrase seems to come from American slang, emerging during the mid-20th century as a way to describe someone who was deliberately or accidentally making an event less enjoyable. The humor in the phrase comes partly from the rhyming structure, the playfulness of the words, even as the meaning is critical. Paying your dues refers to completing the necessary work or sacrifice required before you earn something. The phrase suggests that you can't just arrive at success. You have to pay for it through work, through sacrifice, through proving yourself. It's a phrase that's embedded in ideas of fairness and just desserts, the idea that there's a price to be paid for anything worthwhile. When you pay your dues, you're fulfilling an obligation. You're earning the right to something by proving yourself through effort. Peaches and cream refers to a perfect situation, everything being wonderful and easy. The phrase evokes the image of luxury and indulgence. If your situation is peaches and cream, everything is smooth and pleasant. But the phrase often carries ironic undertones, especially when used in the negative. If something isn't peaches and cream, it means it's difficult or problematic. The phrase uses two luxurious items, combining them to suggest absolute perfection. Penny for your thoughts is what you say when someone seems distant or lost in thought. You're offering a penny in exchange for access to their internal thoughts. The phrase is endearing and curious. It suggests a kind of intimate curiosity about what someone else is thinking. The phrase carries the weight of connection and interest. A penny is a small payment, almost worthless, but the offering itself, the gesture of asking to know what someone is thinking, is what matters. Penny pincher refers to someone who is miserly, who saves money obsessively, who refuses to spend. The phrase comes from the image of someone carefully hoarding every penny, pinching every penny. The phrase carries judgment about the person's relationship to money, suggesting their caution has become pathological. The verb pinch suggests something tight and careful, something controlled and restrained. A penny pincher pinches every coin, treats every cent as precious. Perfectly good means acceptable, appropriate, functioning well. The phrase is used to describe things that are working fine, that don't need replacing or fixing. A perfectly good car is a car that drives well. A perfectly good reason is a reason that adequately explains something. The phrase suggests adequacy without indicating extraordinary excellence. Sometimes perfectly good is enough. Sometimes you don't need more than perfectly good. Pig in mud is an image of contentment and indulgence. A pig in mud is comfortable, happy, relaxed in a situation that might seem unpleasant to others. If you're like a pig in mud, you're completely content in your current situation, taking pleasure in something that others might find unappealing. It's a phrase about personal preference and contentment. What's mud to one person might be mud to another, but the pig is happy there. The phrase suggests that happiness and contentment are subjective, that different people find joy in different things. Pile it on means to add more of something, especially more criticism, more complaints, more negativity. The phrase suggests accumulation and excess. You're piling things on top of something that already exists. You're adding to the burden. The phrase often has negative connotations, suggesting someone is being unfair or excessive in their criticism or complaints. When you tell someone not to pile it on, you're asking them to stop adding to the negative load. Plain as day is something that's completely obvious, that anyone can see, that doesn't require analysis or special insight. The phrase uses the image of daylight, which reveals everything, hides nothing. Something that's plain as day is as obvious as things that are visible in daylight. There's no mystery, no hidden meaning, no complexity to parse. It's just plain. It's just obvious. Everyone can see it. Play your cards right means to handle a situation skillfully, to make good choices, to play your advantageous positions well. The phrase comes from card games, where having good cards and playing them well are two different things. You could have good cards and play them badly, or have less impressive cards and play them skillfully. Playing your cards right means using what you have to maximum advantage. The phrase suggests that it's not just about what you're dealt, it's about how you play your hand. Playing hardball means engaging in a competitive or aggressive manner, not holding back, not being gentle or cautious. The phrase comes from baseball, specifically from hardball, which is the professional version of baseball played with a hard ball. Softball is played with a softer ball and is often considered more casual. Playing hardball means treating something with seriousness and intensity, being willing to engage in competition at the highest level. When you play hardball, you're not playing around. You're serious. Playing the field means dating multiple people without commitment, keeping your options open. The phrase seems to come from sports terminology and also from the general idea of a field being an open space where you can move freely. If you're playing the field, you're not confined to one person, you're exploring your options. The phrase suggests freedom and exploration, but it can also carry connotations of not being serious or ready to commit. Pleasant as a daisy is a phrase that's endearing in tone, suggesting someone is generally pleasant and agreeable. The phrase uses the image of a daisy, a simple flower with positive associations. Someone pleasant as a daisy is easygoing, friendly, not difficult, or challenging to be around. The phrase uses nature imagery to convey pleasantness and simplicity. Plenty of fish in the sea is what people say to comfort someone who's recently lost a romantic relationship. The phrase suggests that this one person wasn't your only option, that there are many other potential partners available. It's a phrase of consolation that emphasizes abundance and availability. The image is of the ocean, infinite and full of possibilities. Though intended as comfort, the phrase can sometimes feel dismissive, suggesting that the person who was lost was easily replaceable. Plumb tuckered out is what you say when you're exhausted, completely tired. The phrase seems to come from the word plumb, meaning completely or thoroughly. If you're plumb tuckered out, you're thoroughly and completely exhausted. There's nothing left in your reserves. The phrase suggests absolute exhaustion, the state where you have nothing more to give. Pound the pavement is what you do when you're looking for work, when you're job hunting. The phrase comes from the actual act of walking around the city, going from business to business, presenting yourself as a job candidate. You're literally pounding the pavement with your feet as you walk. It's a phrase that carries the sense of effort and persistence that job hunting requires. Pounding the pavement suggests effort and determination, the willingness to walk and search and present yourself over and over again. Pour oil on troubled waters is what you do when you try to calm a tense situation, when you try to reduce conflict. The phrase seems to come from the actual practice of sailors pouring oil on stormy seas in an attempt to calm them. Whether this actually works is debatable, but the image is clear. You're trying to smooth things down, to reduce the turbulence. Applied metaphorically, the phrase suggests you're trying to calm people who are in conflict, trying to reduce the intensity of the situation. You're the oil smoothing down the troubled waters. Pulled the wool over his eyes refers to deceiving someone, making them believe something false. The phrase seems to come from the practice of pulling something over someone's eyes to blind them, to obscure their vision. If you pull wool over someone's eyes, you're obscuring their vision, preventing them from seeing the truth. It's a phrase about deliberate deception. You're literally covering their eyes so they can't see what you're doing. Put a cork in it is an old phrase meaning to be quiet, to stop talking. The phrase seems to come from early recording devices, where you would put a cork in the horn of the device to muffle the sound. It's an archaic phrase that doesn't get used much anymore, but it shows how technology and communication methods leave their mark on language. The phrase is charmingly old-fashioned, referring to technology that most of us have never seen. Put on your thinking cap refers to using your intelligence, focusing your mental energy on a problem. The phrase suggests that thinking is something you do by putting on a specific piece of clothing, a cap or hat. It's a playful phrase that makes mental effort into a physical action. When you put on your thinking cap, you're preparing yourself mentally for the work ahead. Put out to pasture means to retire someone, to move them out of active service. The phrase comes from the practice of putting animals, particularly horses, out to pasture when they're no longer useful for work. They're set aside, no longer actively engaged. Applied to people, the phrase suggests retirement, moving someone to the sidelines. It's not always a kind phrase, as it can carry undertones of being put out to pasture against your will. The phrase suggests that the person is being set aside, deemed no longer useful or necessary. Quick as a wink is something that happens very quickly, faster than you can perceive. The phrase references the blinking of an eye, one of the fastest involuntary actions humans perform. Something that happens quick as a wink happens faster than a blink, happens in an imperceptible moment. The phrase emphasizes speed and immediacy. Quiet as a dormouse is a phrase from Lewis Carroll, specifically from Alice in Wonderland. But quiet as a dormouse predates Carroll. It refers to the fact that dormice are quiet animals, rarely making sounds, rarely drawing attention to themselves. Someone quiet as a dormouse is someone who is very quiet, who doesn't make noise, who keeps to themselves. It's a phrase with literary associations that have become part of common speech. Quite the character is something you say about someone who is unusual, distinctive, memorable in some way. The phrase suggests someone stands out. Someone has personality that makes them different from everyone else. The phrase can be complimentary or slightly negative depending on context. Quite the character might mean someone is delightfully eccentric, or might mean someone is difficult and unusual in ways that are challenging. Quiet on the set is a phrase used in filmmaking and theater, telling everyone to stop talking and prepare to perform. The phrase has entered common usage as a way to tell people to be quiet and focus on what's about to happen. It carries the sense of transition from casual talking to focused attention. When someone says quiet on the set, everyone knows it's time to get serious. Rain on your parade means to ruin someone's celebration or excitement, to introduce a negative element into something joyful. The phrase uses the image of actual rain falling on a parade, which would indeed ruin the parade. Applied to people, it means deliberately or accidentally dampening someone's joy or enthusiasm. When you rain on someone's parade, you're bringing them down, making things less joyful. Raking in the dough refers to earning a lot of money, making a substantial income. The phrase uses the image of raking, gathering up something that's been spread out. Dough is another term for money, so raking in the dough means gathering up money, accumulating substantial income. The image is of prosperity and success, of money coming in abundantly. Rank and file refers to the ordinary members of an organization or movement, as opposed to the leaders. The phrase comes from military terminology. Rank refers to the level in the hierarchy, while file refers to the line formations that soldiers stand in. Rank and file soldiers are the regular troops, not the officers. Applied generally, rank and file refers to ordinary members. The phrase suggests the distinction between leadership and the general membership. Red as a rose refers to something being a bright, vivid red color. The phrase uses the image of a rose, typically red, as a standard of redness. Something red as a rose is bright red, vivid, unmistakably red. The phrase makes use of a natural image to convey color. Red herring is a phrase meaning a misleading clue, something that distracts you from the truth. The phrase seems to come from the practice of dragging a smoked herring, which is red and has a strong smell, across a trail to distract hunting dogs from following the original scent. If you follow the red herring, you've been distracted. You've gone off track. Applied to investigations or arguments, a red herring is something that seems significant but actually leads nowhere, something that distracts you from the real issue. The phrase captures the sense of being deliberately or accidentally led astray. Red Letter Day refers to a day that's particularly special or memorable, usually for positive reasons. The phrase comes from the practice of marking important days in red in religious calendars. Saints' days and holidays were marked in red to distinguish them from ordinary days. So a Red Letter Day is a day distinguished, a day worth noting and remembering. The phrase carries the sense of importance and specialness. Rich as Croesus refers to being extremely wealthy. Croesus was a legendary king known for his vast wealth. So if you're as rich as Croesus, you're extremely wealthy, you have extraordinary amounts of money. The phrase carries historical and mythological weight, invoking an image of legendary wealth. The phrase suggests wealth so substantial that it's almost mythological. Right off the bat means immediately, right away, without delay. The phrase comes from baseball. When you hit a ball right off the bat, it happens immediately. There's no delay between hitting and the ball being in motion. Applied to other contexts, the phrase means something happens right away, instantly. The phrase suggests immediacy and speed. Ring a bell means to spark a memory, to remind someone of something they've heard or experienced before. The phrase uses the image of a bell ringing, drawing attention, creating a memory. Something that rings a bell is something that resonates with a memory you have that triggers recollection. The phrase suggests that something connects to something already in your memory. Rise and shine is a phrase meaning to wake up and get moving, to be energetic and active. The phrase suggests rising from bed and shining with energy and enthusiasm. It's typically used as an exhortation to get up and be active. The phrase is often used in a somewhat playful or commanding way, telling someone to wake up and start their day. Rock in a hard place refers to being in a difficult situation where all available options are bad. The phrase uses the image of being caught between two objects, a rock and a hard place. There's no good option, only choices between bad outcomes. The phrase suggests being trapped between unpleasant alternatives. Rocking the boat means causing trouble, disrupting the status quo, creating conflict. The phrase comes from the image of rocking a boat, which makes it unstable and dangerous. If you rock the boat, you're making things less stable. You're introducing instability into a previously stable situation. The phrase often carries a negative judgment, suggesting that causing disturbance isn't valued. Though rocking the boat can also be positive, suggesting necessary disruption of an unjust status quo. Rub the wrong way means to irritate someone, to annoy them, to go against their preferences. The phrase uses the image of rubbing something in the wrong direction, which would indeed irritate or damage it. If you rub someone the wrong way, you're irritating them. You're doing things that annoy them. It's a phrase about interpersonal friction. The phrase suggests that there's a right way and a wrong way to deal with people. Ruled the roost is what you say about someone who dominates a situation, who is in charge. The phrase comes from the image of a rooster in charge of a roost, the place where chickens live. A rooster rules the roost, he's in control. Applied to people, the phrase suggests someone is clearly in charge, is clearly dominant. The phrase carries the sense that this person has authority and control. Run it up the flagpole is a modern phrase meaning to present an idea for consideration, to put something out there to see what people think. The phrase seems to come from the practice of raising a flag on a flagpole as a signal, a way of communicating. You run an idea up the flagpole, you present it, you see if people salute it or shoot it down. It's a phrase that's entered business speak as a way to describe the process of introducing new ideas. The phrase suggests testing something in public before committing to it. Run like the wind means to run very fast, faster than you thought possible. The phrase uses the image of the wind as something fast and uncontrollable. When you run like the wind, you're running as fast as natural forces. It's a phrase about maximum speed and effort. The image suggests speed that's almost supernatural, that exceeds normal human capacity. Running on fumes refers to operating on very little energy or resources. The phrase uses the image of a car running on fumes, the last bits of gas in the tank. When you're running on fumes, you're almost out of resources, you're barely keeping going, you've got very little left to give. The phrase suggests exhaustion and depletion. The image is of someone or something that's on the verge of stopping. Rusty gate squeals. The loudest is a less common phrase that suggests things that are broken or damaged call more attention to themselves than things that work well. A rusty gate that hasn't been maintained will make noise, will draw attention, while properly maintained things operate silently and invisibly. The phrase suggests that problems are more visible than solutions. Broken things announce themselves. Fixed things are invisible. Safe and sound means secure, unharmed in a protected state. The phrase uses two words that have similar meanings to emphasize the idea of safety. Something that's safe and sound is completely secure, there's no danger, no reason to worry. The phrase doubles down on the concept of safety for emphasis. Salt of the earth refers to good people, people with integrity and value. The phrase comes from biblical references to salt as a preservative and as something valuable. Salt of the earth people are fundamental, essential, valuable members of society. The phrase suggests that these people are basic and necessary, like salt is necessary to preserve and flavor food. The phrase is complementary, suggesting that the person or group being described are fundamentally good and valuable. Same old is a phrase describing something that never changes, that's always the same. The phrase suggests monotony and stagnation. It's usually used with a slightly tired or resigned tone, suggesting that the repetition is boring or frustrating. When something is the same old, it's predictable but also tiresome. Sand in your shoes is an irritant, something that bothers you, something that gets between you and comfort. The phrase uses the image of literally getting sand in your shoes at the beach, which is uncomfortable and annoying. Metaphorically, sand in your shoes refers to anything that creates friction or annoyance in your life. The image is precise and relatable. Saved by the bell refers to being saved from a negative situation by a stroke of luck or good timing. The phrase comes from boxing, where the bell rings at the end of each round. If a boxer is in trouble and the bell rings, he's saved from having to continue fighting. Applied to other situations, the phrase refers to good timing that prevents a negative outcome. The phrase carries the sense that you barely escaped something worse. Savvy is understanding, knowing, being smart about something. The phrase comes from Spanish, from the word saber meaning to know. It entered English through contact between English speakers and Spanish speakers, particularly in colonial and trading contexts. To have savvy about something is to have knowledge and understanding of it. The phrase shows how language exchanges happen through cultural contact. Spanish words become English words through repeated interaction and communication. Scales fall from his eyes is a phrase referring to someone suddenly understanding something they didn't understand before. The phrase comes from biblical stories where scales actually fall from someone's eyes when they gain understanding or spiritual insight. It's a poetic phrase for sudden realization and comprehension. The images of something literally blocking vision suddenly falling away, allowing sight. Applied to understanding, the phrase suggests that what was previously obscure suddenly becomes clear. Seize the day is a phrase that means to take advantage of an opportunity, to make the most of the present moment, to not waste time. The phrase comes from the Latin carpe diem, from the Roman poet Horace. It was part of a larger philosophical concept about the transience of life, the idea that we should make the most of what we have right now because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. The phrase has become a rallying cry for living fully and taking action rather than hesitating or procrastinating. It suggests that opportunities are fleeting and we need to grab them when they appear. Horace was writing in ancient Rome, but his words have survived the centuries because they capture something fundamentally human, the tension between seizing opportunity and the fear that we might miss something if we don't act. Every generation has people who need to be reminded to seize the day, to stop waiting for the perfect moment and just act. Sell someone down the river means to betray someone, to sacrifice them for your own benefit. The phrase seems to come from the era of slavery in America. The Mississippi River was a central route for the slave trade. To sell someone down the river was to sell them into slavery further south, away from their family and community, into harsher conditions. The phrase carries the weight of this terrible history. When you sell someone down the river, you're betraying them, you're putting them in danger or difficulty for your own gain. The phrase is particularly jarring because of its connection to slavery, one of history's darkest chapters. Yet the phrase persists in modern usage, often stripped of its specific historical context, used casually to describe any betrayal. This is both sad and a reminder of how history is embedded in our language, whether we're aware of it or not. Set your teeth on edge means to annoy or irritate you intensely. The phrase comes from a physical sensation. When you hear certain sounds or experience certain tastes, you get a sensation where it feels like your teeth are on edge, uncomfortable and jarring. Chalk on a blackboard, fingernails on a chalkboard, these things literally set your teeth on edge. Applied to behavior or people, the phrase refers to that same sense of intense irritation and discomfort. The phrase is interesting because it uses a specific physical sensation to describe an emotional or mental state. We've all experienced that feeling of fingernails on a chalkboard, that visceral discomfort. The phrase captures that discomfort and transfers it to describe how certain people or behaviors make us feel. Shake a leg means to hurry, to get moving, to not waste time. The phrase seems to come from the idea of movement and action. When you shake a leg, you're moving, you're putting your body into motion. Applied more broadly, shaking a leg means getting active, getting busy, moving forward with something. The phrase suggests energy and action. It's a phrase that's often used as a playful command or encouragement to someone who's moving slowly. Shake like a leaf means to tremble, to shake from fear or cold. The phrase uses the image of a leaf, which shakes and trembles in the slightest breeze. Someone shaking like a leaf is shaking uncontrollably, is physically displaying their fear or distress. The image is vivid and immediate, suggesting extreme vulnerability and exposure. We all understand instantly what it means to shake like a leaf because we've all experienced or observed someone in a state of extreme fear or cold, where their entire body is trembling. Shake on it means to seal an agreement with a handshake. The phrase comes from the old practice of confirming a deal with a handshake. When two people shake hands after agreeing on something, the handshake itself becomes the seal, the confirmation that the deal is made. The phrase suggests trust and honor, the idea that a handshake was once enough to bind people to their word. This practice persists in more formal contexts, but the phrase reminds us of a time when a person's word and their handshake were considered binding contracts, when honor and reputation were enough to seal a deal. Shambles refers to a state of disorder or confusion, a chaotic situation. The phrase seems to come from the word for slaughterhouse, a place of chaos and blood. A shambles would be a place in complete disarray. Applied more generally, the phrase refers to any situation that's fallen into disorder and chaos. The phrase carries connotations of destruction and chaos. When something is a shambles, it's not just messy or disorganized, it's completely fallen apart. It's chaotic and possibly damaged beyond easy repair. Shape up or ship out means you need to improve your behavior or leave. The phrase comes from military or nautical contexts. Sailors who didn't shape up, who didn't comply with rules or perform well, would be shipped out, transferred, or dismissed. The phrase suggests that there are standards to be met and consequences for not meeting them. In military contexts, the phrase takes on an even more serious tone, suggesting that if you don't meet standards, you'll be sent somewhere else, possibly to a dangerous location. The phrase carries the weight of military discipline and the understanding that not everyone can meet the required standards. Sharp as a tack means extremely intelligent, quick-witted, mentally acute. The phrase uses the image of a tack, which is pointed and sharp. A sharp mind is pointed, cutting, able to penetrate to the heart of an issue. Someone sharp as a tack is mentally acute and quick. We often use this phrase to describe people who are particularly intelligent or quick-thinking, people who seem to understand things faster than others around them. Shed crocodile tears means to cry insincerely, to pretend to be sad when you're not. The phrase comes from the old belief that crocodiles cry after they eat, that they shed tears while consuming their prey. Whether this is actually true about crocodiles is debatable, but the image stuck. Someone shedding crocodile tears is making a display of emotion that's not genuine. The phrase suggests that just as a crocodile is not actually sorry about eating its prey, someone shedding crocodile tears is not actually sorry about whatever they're crying about. It's one of those phrases that captures the idea of false emotion, of using tears as a manipulative tool rather than as a genuine expression of feeling. Sheep in wolf's clothing refers to someone or something that appears dangerous or threatening, but is actually harmless or weak. The phrase is a reversal of the more common wolf in sheep's clothing. Rather than a wolf disguised as a sheep, this is a sheep trying to appear like a wolf. The phrase suggests that appearances can be deceiving, that someone might be trying to project an image that doesn't match reality. The phrase is less common than its reverse, but it describes an equally important phenomenon: the person who pretends to be stronger or more dangerous than they actually are. Shelf life refers to how long something can be stored before it becomes unusable. The phrase comes from commercial contexts, where products have a shelf life during which they can be sold. Applied more generally, shelf life refers to how long something remains useful or relevant. An idea might have a long shelf life or a short shelf life depending on how enduring it is. The phrase captures the idea that not everything lasts forever, that usefulness and relevance have limits. Shift gears means to change approach, to change direction, to move from one mode to another. The phrase comes from driving, where shifting gears changes the mechanical behavior of the vehicle. You shift gears to go faster or slower, to handle different conditions. Applied to behavior or strategy, shifting gears means changing your approach or tactics. The phrase has become so embedded in our language that many people who use it have never actually driven a manual transmission car and wouldn't fully understand the mechanical process it refers to. Yet the phrase persists and everyone understands it anyway. Shine like a new penny means to look bright and clean, to appear polished and fresh. The phrase uses the image of a new penny, which is shiny and bright. Something that shines like a new penny is clean, well-maintained, and attractive. The phrase suggests brightness and value. It's a phrase that's often used to describe someone who's dressed well or someone who's in good spirits and seems to shine with vitality. Shoe is on the other foot refers to a reversal of circumstances, a situation where the tables have turned. The phrase uses the image of a shoe moving from one foot to the other, suggesting that situations have been reversed. When the shoe is on the other foot, the person who was in one position is now in a different position, often the opposite position. The phrase is often used when someone who was previously in a position of power or advantage finds themselves in the opposite situation. Shoestring budget refers to a very limited budget, having very little money to work with. The phrase seems to come from the idea of getting by on almost nothing, of operating with minimal resources. A shoestring is a small, seemingly insignificant thing, so a shoestring budget is a minimal budget. The phrase suggests making do with very little. Many people have operated on a shoestring budget at some point in their lives, learning to be creative with minimal resources. Shoot the breeze means to have a casual conversation, to chat idly without serious purpose. The phrase seems to come from the idea of directing your words casually, without aim or purpose. Shooting the breeze is different from having a serious discussion. It's light, conversational, not going anywhere in particular. The phrase suggests a kind of relaxed social interaction where the goal is connection and companionship rather than the exchange of important information. Shortchange someone means to give them less than they're owed, to treat them unfairly. The phrase comes from monetary transactions where you would give someone less change than they deserved. Applied more broadly, shortchanging someone means treating them unfairly, not giving them what they deserve. The phrase suggests deliberate deception in financial transactions, someone trying to cheat another person out of money they're owed. Shot in the dark refers to a wild guess, an attempt made with little hope of success. The phrase uses the image of shooting in the dark, firing blindly without being able to see your target. A shot in the dark might hit something by accident, but you're not aiming at anything specific. The phrase suggests that you're just trying something with minimal expectation of success. It's a phrase that captures the act of guessing or attempting something when you have very little information to go on. Shoulder to the wheel means to work hard, to put effort into something, to take up the responsibility. The phrase uses the image of putting your shoulder against something and pushing it, exerting force. When you put your shoulder to the wheel, you're working hard, you're putting in effort. The phrase is often used to encourage people to work harder or to praise people who are putting in consistent effort. Shrug off means to dismiss something, to not worry about something, to let it go. The phrase uses the image of shrugging your shoulders, a gesture of dismissal or indifference. When you shrug something off, you're treating it as unimportant, you're not letting it bother you. The phrase suggests a kind of emotional resilience, the ability to not let things get to you. Shy away from means to avoid something, to not approach something. The phrase uses the image of a shy person, someone who pulls back from social interaction. When you shy away from something, you're avoiding it, you're not approaching it. The phrase suggests that something is making you uncomfortable or afraid, causing you to back away from it. Sick as a dog means very ill, extremely sick. The phrase compares sickness to how a dog might appear when very ill. Someone sick as a dog is in poor health, is seriously unwell. The phrase is often used hyperbolic ally to describe someone who's experiencing moderate illness, not necessarily truly as sick as a dog would be. Sick and tired of means completely frustrated with something, having had enough of something. The phrase combines two words that suggest exhaustion and frustration. When you're sick and tired of something, you've reached the limit of your patience. The phrase is emphatic and final, suggesting that you're done putting up with something. Sigh of relief refers to the feeling and expression of relief after something stressful has passed. When you finally relax and sigh with relief, the stress has been lifted and you can breathe again. The phrase combines the physical action of sighing with the emotional state of relief. We all know the feeling of that sigh when something stressful finally ends. Sign of the times refers to something that reflects current conditions or trends. When something is a sign of the times, it indicates what's happening in society right now, what the current state of things is. The phrase suggests that certain signs tell us about the era we're living in. The phrase is often used to comment on social or cultural phenomena that seem to define a particular moment in history. Signed, sealed, and delivered means something is completely finished, completely accomplished. The phrase comes from formal processes where documents needed to be signed, sealed with a seal, and delivered to the recipient. All three steps had to be completed for something to be officially done. Applied generally, the phrase means something is completely finished and accomplished. The phrase suggests that there's no going back, that the thing is absolutely done. Silence is golden means that not speaking can be more valuable than speaking, that quiet has value. The phrase suggests that there are times when staying silent is better than talking, when quiet accomplishment is more valuable than constant speech. The phrase has roots in philosophy and wisdom traditions that value silence and contemplation. Silent as the grave refers to complete silence, the absence of all sound. The grave is a place of absolute stillness and silence. Something that's silent as the grave is completely quiet, makes no noise at all. The phrase is often used to describe rooms or situations that are unnaturally quiet, where you'd expect sound but find only silence. Silver bullet refers to a simple, quick solution to a complex problem. The phrase comes from the folklore idea that a silver bullet was the only thing that could harm supernatural creatures like werewolves. Applied to problems, a silver bullet is a solution that quickly solves what seems like an unsolvable problem. However, the phrase often carries irony, suggesting that such solutions don't actually exist. In reality, most complex problems don't have silver bullet solutions, but we keep looking for them. Silver lining refers to a positive aspect of a negative situation, hope in the midst of difficulty. The phrase comes from the idea of storm clouds. Even dark storm clouds might have a silver lining where the sun is breaking through. Applied to situations, finding the silver lining means finding something positive in an otherwise negative situation. The phrase is often used to comfort people who are going through difficult times, to help them see that there might be something good that comes from the situation. Sing a different tune means to change your position or opinion, to take a different stance than before. The phrase uses the image of changing songs, changing melodies. When you sing a different tune, you're expressing a different viewpoint than you expressed before. The phrase suggests that you've reconsidered your position and are now advocating for something different. Sink or swim means you're going to either succeed or fail. There's no middle ground. The phrase uses the image of being in water and having to either float and survive or sink and drown. You're on your own, and the outcome is up to you. The phrase suggests that there are no safety nets, no middle ground. You either make it or you don't. Sinking feeling refers to a sense of dread or despair, the feeling that something bad is about to happen. The phrase uses the image of something sinking, falling down. When you get a sinking feeling, you have a sense that things are going to go wrong. The phrase captures that stomach-dropping sensation when you realize something is about to go badly. Sit tight means to wait, to remain in your position, to not take action. The phrase suggests sitting firmly in one place, being patient and waiting for something to happen or be resolved. The phrase is often used as a command or instruction to wait and not interfere. Sitting duck refers to someone or something that's vulnerable, easy to attack or take advantage of. The phrase uses the image of a duck sitting on water, unable to escape quickly. A sitting duck is an easy target. The phrase suggests vulnerability and the lack of ability to defend oneself or escape. Sitting pretty means to be in a good position, to be comfortable or successful. The phrase suggests sitting in comfort, being satisfied with your situation. When you're sitting pretty, things are going well for you. The phrase often implies that this good situation is stable and likely to continue. 6 of one, half a dozen of another refers to two things that are essentially the same, where it doesn't matter which you choose. The phrase uses mathematical equivalence. 6 and a half dozen are the same number expressed differently. When two things are 6 of one and half a dozen of another, they're equivalent. The phrase is often used when people are debating which of two options is better, and you're suggesting that they're essentially the same. Size up means to evaluate someone or something, to form a judgment. The phrase seems to come from the idea of gauging the size or magnitude of something, assessing it. When you size someone up, you're forming an opinion about them based on observation. The phrase suggests a careful, evaluative look, taking in information to form a judgment. Sketch the outline refers to providing the basic framework or main points without filling in all the details. The phrase comes from drawing, where you first sketch an outline before adding details and shading. A sketched outline gives you the basic form, but not the complete picture. Applied to explanations or plans, sketching the outline means providing the main points without going into full detail. The phrase suggests giving the basics without the elaboration, and so we continue to expand through phrase after phrase, layer after layer of language that carries within it centuries of human experience. We've moved through origins that are clear and origins that remain mysterious. We've explored phrases that come from violence and phrases that come from tenderness. We've seen how language reflects every aspect of human experience, how it captures both our cruelty and our capacity for beauty. We've looked at how modern phrases emerge and how ancient phrases persist, how language adapts and changes while maintaining threads of continuity with the past. The remarkable thing about language is how it persists. These phrases, some of them centuries old, continue to be used even as the circumstances that created them fade into history. We say snug as a bug in a rug without thinking about what that phrase means. We talk about snowball effects without considering the physics of actual snowballs. We use phrases that were born in specific moments and specific contexts, and we carry them forward into completely different contexts, giving them new meanings while they retain echoes of their original ones. Language is palimpsest, layer upon layer of meaning and history. Every word we speak contains the history of everyone who spoke it before us. Every phrase carries within it the weight of centuries, the experiences of countless people facing countless situations and finding words to describe them. When you examine the origins of phrases, you're essentially looking at the archaeological record of human experience, digging through layers of culture and history to find the moments when people first needed to describe something. What's beautiful about this is that we're not just repeating what came before, we're adding to it. Every time you use one of these phrases, you're part of the ongoing history of language. You're participating in a conversation that stretches backward to the past and forward into the future. You're keeping these phrases alive. You're giving them new contexts and new meanings. You're ensuring that they'll continue to be passed down to future generations who will use them in ways we can't yet imagine. The origins of phrases matter not because they give us trivia to share at parties. though they do that. They matter because they connect us to history, to human experience that precedes us and will continue after us. They matter because they remind us that we're part of something larger than ourselves, part of a tradition of meaning-making that goes back thousands of years. They matter because they show us that language is never neutral, never empty of history or meaning. Every phrase we use carries within it the stamp of the human beings who created it and passed it forward. So sleep well knowing that you're part of this history. Wake up with the understanding that the ordinary language you use every day carries within it the extraordinary experiences of countless people. And as you move through your day, use these phrases with the awareness that you're not just speaking words. You're keeping alive the accumulated wisdom and experience of human civilization. You're part of a chain that extends backward into the distant past and forward into an unknown future. Thank you for this journey through language and history, through the origins of phrases that shape how we speak and how we think. Thank you for taking the time to explore the depths of something that usually remains invisible to us, something we use without thinking about. And thank you for being part of the ongoing history of language, for being one of the people who will pass these phrases forward into the future. You are a keeper of language, whether you realize it or not. Every time you speak, you're preserving and transforming the linguistic inheritance that was given to you. May your words carry meaning. May your language connect you to others, both present and past. And may the phrases you speak remind you always that you are part of something much larger than yourself. You are part of the ongoing human conversation, the endless exchange of meaning that has made us human and continues to do so. This is where we truly leave you, not because the story of language ends here, but because your part in continuing it begins now. Go forth with this knowledge, with this awareness, with this connection to the past. Use your words carefully, speak with intention, and remember that every phrase you use is both a gift from those who came before and a gift you're giving to those who come after. Sleep if you are still awake. Rest if you are drifting towards sleep. And when you wake, carry this knowledge with you into your life. Let it shape how you speak and how you listen. Let it remind you that language is never just language. It's always history, always culture, always human beings trying to make sense of their world and pass that sense along to the people who come after them. You are part of that tradition now. You are one of the keepers of language. What you do with it matters. How you speak matters. The words you choose matter. Every phrase you utter is a small act of participation in the great human conversation that has been ongoing for millennia and will continue long after you're gone. We're all connected through language. We're all part of this continuous conversation that spans centuries and crosses continents. And you right now are part of that too. You're part of the history of language. You're part of the future of these phrases. Use them well. Use them with awareness. Use them with the knowledge that you're not just speaking words. You're carrying forward the wisdom and experience of countless people who came before you. This is not the end. This is a moment of rest before the next chapter. Go forth with your newfound knowledge. Notice the phrases in the world around you. Pay attention to the language that surrounds you in casual conversation and in formal contexts. Connect with the history that's embedded in every word, and know that somewhere out there, someone is using one of these phrases right now, just as you have, just as people have for centuries, continuing the endless conversation that is human language and human connection. The journey through language is never complete. There are always more phrases to discover, more origins to explore, more connections to make between the past and the present. But you've taken a significant step today. You've opened yourself to the awareness that language carries history, that words matter, that phrases are more than just convenient ways to communicate. They're vessels that carry the accumulated experience of humanity forward through time. May that awareness stay with you. May it enrich your life and your relationships. May it help you speak with more consciousness, more care, and more connection to the great web of human meaning-making that extends both backward and forward through time.